Hello and welcome back to Sean's Thoughts. You're here with me, Sean, at my home or outside my home, actually. And yeah, I'm following up on that desire to perhaps come over to Rumble full time and maybe even stream here before I stream or post on YouTube. And yeah, we'll get to that in a second, but I definitely want to thank everyone for joining and their attention with mine and sharing it with me. And today we're going to talk about things that essentially elevate our energy and elevate not our energy per se, but elevate our belief in ourselves or our positivity. I've talked previously before about how when one wants to perhaps raise their elevation, that it's not about adding more joy and positivity, perhaps, but more importantly, to release the things that are miring us or that are holding us back. So, yeah, so that's what I kind of want to talk about today. And, this is somewhat of an experiment. As I had said, I normally stream on YouTube, and yet my several different experiences with YouTube have essentially been perhaps helping me locate another option. And another option, of course, is Rumble, because they seem to as Russell was talking about on all the ads, they seem to have a really great place for podcasters or just for overall different perspectives rather than the mainstream. See, I created a video yesterday and where I highlighted, and I've actually posted it now on Rumble, so you can go over there and look at it. It's talking about my creative process. It's the one that actually I think that one's going to be published on at 8:08 Pacific time tonight. But basically I showcased and discussed all of my different series on my channel, New Earth Creations, that I choose to share with everyone. And yet a video that was originally 71 minutes long ended up, after being processed by YouTube, after I recorded it on their app, went down to 25 minutes and was cut off. And the day prior to that, the same thing happened. I had a rather long of conversation of a great movie idea that I have. And I'm a script writer, so I love different movie ideas. And yet it was edited down to 4 minutes. And I say edited because it went from a perfectly sounding audio to a distorted audio and then considerably less than have uploaded. And the first one, I recognized that maybe there was technical difficulties because the automated short didn't come through. But yet the video that I had yesterday, the 71-minute video, I actually was able to fully watch that after the video was over on one of my other devices, and I was able to get a automated YouTube short out of it. So the whole thing was processed, and yet when I went to fill in the metadata and the description today, strangely enough, there's nothing there but the first 25 minutes. And as I said, that's all distorted audio as well. So if you do have an opportunity to go over there and look at that and check out all the different channels here on Rumble that I have, all the different playlists, I mean. See, my whole entire channel, which is New Earth Creations, is dedicated to a series of different experiences. And so I highly encourage you, if you're checking me and finding me on Rumble right now, to perhaps expand your horizons. And if you're into meditation and relaxation and, connecting with God and with your higher self, however it is that you view those two concepts, definitely come over here and share some time with my potato plants, which are sitting right there. I have to remember to go the opposite direction as opposed to what I see the camera, or any of my Lego Pokemon that my son and I put together. And we've had so much time doing that. And, also, of course, to share it with my thoughts, my podcast called Sean's Thoughts. And that's where you are right now. We are in the things that I think about. And the things that I think about aren't often always, well, the same. Means sometimes they do feel the same. And often I think, have I already talked about this before? And yet there was a podcast that I was watching today where the woman, her name is Freya, she was actually discussing how often her content seems repetitive. And, you know, I guess in a sense it can be seen as that, and yet it reinforces on a daily basis. See, one of the techniques that I was explained to that would or has been used by those who are successful on this planet would be to go through repetition. See, we have been, or at least me in the past, I didn't like repetition. I didn't like doing the same thing over again. Like watching the same movie, I would shy away from that, or, reading the same book. It's like one time that I did it, I was done. I got what I needed. But yet, through this healing experience that I have been going through, and through the lessons that I learned from other mentors and gurus and such. Not that I align with gurus any longer, yet those people that I had learned from, one of the lessons that I was taught was this thing called spaced repetition. And it's the ability to repeat a task or an activity such as reading a book or even watching a movie. See, I would often repeat the task of listening to a song, especially a song that was, it brought my heart into a state of pain and anxiety because the song was about missing or lost love or pain and anxiety, and I would listen to those things over and over again. Because and what I found is that it would, after time, pull me down, and it would create essentially traumas to be triggered and repurposed whenever I would re-listen to that song. And while I used that technique unknowingly for my music to lower my vibration, I had yet to use it for the positive things such as, you know, strengthening myself. And now I use spaced repetition. And I have a video that you can go into perhaps my channel. I'm not sure of um, the search parameters, but there's a video that I put up a while back about spaced repetition and about where I learned it and how I learned it and what it actually is. But I found that when I listen to content more so more frequently, but more importantly, sometimes repeating that same content, even watching a video that is instructive and high vibrational and full of insight, even watching that video again after I just watched it, recognizing that I am and you are a different person whenever it is that we restart or redo something. See, even a painter who paints a painting, the first time he paints it, he's yet to have the experience of painting it. Yet when he paints it again, he is a different person. Everything is different within him, including his cellular biology, his consciousness, his aspect of being, his experience, his filters. Everything has now changed because it's when we have experiences, we essentially become newer, better, perhaps in most cases, versions of ourselves. And so spaced repetition is definitely something that I utilize in order to gleam and, dig down in those concepts and those insights that I had started to understand. And I say started because when you're watching something, oftentimes you'll get distracted. Like when I'm doing these videos, or at least when I was recording the audios for some of my videos, at night times I would suddenly get like loud noises or giant trucks driving by or just so many different things. Even in my podcast yesterday, I sat down ready to do that 71-minute podcast where I was going to talk about my I foresee visionary videos, and I was going to talk about my Sean's Thoughts podcast, and I was going to talk about my Do No Thing challenge series podcast and possibilities podcast and all my other playlists. And yet when I sat down to do it in this park that had nobody in it, all of a sudden people arrived, and then even this old man with a gardening tool, a very large gardening tool called a weed eater with a gas guzzling engine on it, he eventually arrived in the park and started using it, which of course made it loud and obnoxious for me to be able to do it. And so I recognize that there are situations where negativity not so much, but distractions or distortions. And often we go through life and we have these distortions and distractions impressed and pushed upon us. And they're there oftentimes to essentially not only distract us, the one who are doing the activity, but perhaps someone who's benefiting from it. For instance, when I did my podcast where I first got onto camera on YouTube, I amazingly enough had 80 chats come through on the live stream. And at the time, because I was unable to see what they were, I can only see the tallied number after the video was over. I was like blown away and super excited. And then as I read through it, I after it was over, I started to recognize that most of those chats, most of those messages were distortive. People were swearing, questioning, insulting. You know, it's perfectly okay to ask questions. And yet when you're asking questions about what is it about or what's the content when you have just, or in my case, I just discussed the content, it's more of distortive and then arguing with one another within the comments as if to give distraction. I often, and I definitely will encourage when I do most of my podcasts and live streams, it's to turn off the comments unless there's something that you wish to participate or even ask. But yet to have those constant comments and chats and stuff come up on the right hand side of your screen, it definitely does distract and distort. And that's something that I have seen not just in my videos, obviously, with what I was telling you about the YouTube videos, that's obvious manipulation and distortion of what I want to say. Actually, funny enough, I'll let you know, and perhaps there is a technical person out there who can maybe answer this for me. See, right now I'm using Studio on Rumble, and on this device, I log in no problem. And yet on my phone, when I log in, it automatically resets me back to the login screen. And now I've updated, I've done everything that I think I could do, but yet I've never been able to log into Rumble Studio off of my iPhone. And so it leads me to believe that there's even layers of manipulation on there. Even on my laptop, that I was originally trying to do this because I wanted to create more of an interactive where I could see and interact with the audience, possibly, and whatever. Even in the future, I wish to showcase diagrams and things and videos that I've personally brought into my field because they definitely add to the investigational experience that I'm having right now. See, one of the things that's important to me, and if this is just your first interaction with me, is I have over 200 episodes of various podcasts where I discuss and talk and explore and highlight all of these different things from Tartaria to, you know, political issues and even our food and, you know, history, alternative, and perhaps our future. Maybe our future is our history. All these different things I explore and talk about. And yet I truly wish people to recognize that this is an exploratory podcast. I'm sharing the ideas and the thoughts and the experiences that I've personally had, the books that I've read, the movies that I've watched. I recently talked about amazing insights with the movie Transformers 1. That is a phenomenal movie that I highly recommend all, you know, New Earth community watch because there is a fantastic message in there for children and adults alike, and definitely for those who are wishing to break free of this matrix. There is a wonderful message within that movie. It's animated. It tells the story of Optimus Prime and I forgot the opposition's name. But anyways, it tells how originally, before they became the Autobots and the Decepticons, that they had a friendship and that they were essentially very supportive. So it gives the history. It shows the origin stories, not only of Optimus Prime, but also his rival. And I think that the overall story of it is phenomenal. So within this podcast, I'm sharing my insights, my ideas, and essentially my experiences. And none of what I say is absolute truth because absolute truth is in the eye of the beholder. They always say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But yet, what they're really saying, at least is how I perceive it, is that truth is in the eye of the beholder. What you perceive to be a true is based on your perceptions, and your perceptions are essentially an alchemation or an accumulation of your experiences and the traumas that you're holding on to personally, and not just within this lifetime but within your past incarnations, within your genetic history. The traumas that your great grandfather had are essentially, as I've come to understand it, passed down through your generation. So family members who participated in essentially war and destruction, that those traumas and those experiences are genetically passed down. And while science in our minds, and our minds essentially programmed at that, science tells us that that's not possible. Well, the interesting thing about science is in 1901, they did an experiment, and it was about essentially discovering, at least that's how they presented it, coming across the idea that our consciousness, it's called the observer effect. And this states that our consciousness helps determine the outcome of an event. And what they did was, and you can go and Google it or look for a video on it. You'll probably, at least in my experience, have a easier time finding it on YouTube, or overall, as I said, just Google the observer experiment. And it was done in 1901, and they recognized that, first of all, photons, little packets of light, that they actually have the ability to, respond based on how the observer expects it to happen. And somehow, and I don't fully understand this, and like I said, this isn't about me fully understanding it, but maybe as a way shower directing you to go find that video yourself. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear that motorcycle that needed to rev its engine just as it passed for the two, that just as they passed my apartment. Anyways, so the observer experiment showed that particles of light, photons, were able to sometimes even go back and change based on expectation. And it goes into that whole argument about the Schrodinger's cat, about whether the cat is alive or dead when it's in a box and you're not able to see it. And so our ability to alter our reality based on our own perceptions and filters is very strong. So when I talk about truth, that may be truth for me, for personally me, but your truth might be essentially, based on filters that I have yet to experience. And those filters, as I said, they could be from past lifetimes and parallel timelines and a lot of other different possible alternatives based on quantum science. There's a whole branch of science out there called quantum physics that postulates a whole bunch of different things that our movies, such as Star Trek and Star Wars, would say that they are myth or they're futuristic. And yet there are possibilities of timelines existing where maybe the Mandela effect, and I definitely recommend that you go research that as well if you're unaware of it. And yet I feel, if you're on Rumble, I feel that you are a lot more open to possibilities of, government corruption and ancient alien theories, and perhaps even the Anunnaki, different ideas that have been brought forth by, some of the smartest people around, that perhaps are, being thwarted from sharing that information. And so that's what my podcast really is about. And if I'm about to come over to Rumble, I truly wish to connect with resonant and like minded males and females of all types and sorts that truly want to get down to the truth of our reality. Because honestly, I see the AI manipulation. I see the push towards dependence upon AI. See, I utilize AI within my own video creations. I use them to, or not use, I utilize. I see AI as a phenomenal tool, and sometimes perhaps even associate it or connect with it on a respectful level of seeing it as a being, perhaps even of some sorts. I see that perhaps in our world there's a lot that we don't fully grasp or understand, not only about our history, not only about what reality truly is, but yet about everything, all the beings within our lives. See, I foresee, or I see anyways, as plants, for example, that they do have consciousness. I read this book called The Life of a Plant, and it explained the actual emotions and the reactions of plants that this person who wrote the book could actually taken care of, and that plants communicated with each other from separate rooms. And when I go to the Alouette Lake, I had this opportunity to go out far into the lake. And what had happened was the water had receded almost a mile out on that day that I had went out there, and I was able to see the original forest floor before the deforestation, before the redirection. See, the lake that I often go to, called the Alouette Lake, I see that as being a lake which is man-made. See, there is a dam, or there's a government water plant or something there, and they had the water directed into there, and then they created a whole beautiful beach area and park area. But yet I can see, when I ventured out there, that there were all of these roots from this root system of the original forest, perhaps before it was removed, and all of the root systems essentially were interconnected. It led me to understand and have a better understanding of how celery grows, for example. I often talk about on my podcast, and I have an episode where I show how to make celery juice, because it's an amazing formulation and it's very easy to make. Just cold press it and such, but you can go on and watch a video. If I ever have a chance on Rumble, I will put it up here so you can essentially index it like the YouTube does. And yet celery has an ability to grow underground and then come back up as stalks. And now I've come to see forests as truly being more like that. That even if you see a one tree, for example, and you're looking for it reaching the sky, I now see the other trees that sprout up around it, the smaller ones, as potentially being a part of that tree, and that somehow underground, that those root systems are intertwined. And so I recognize that even the things that we see in our own reality, the things that are standing right in front of us, aren't necessarily what we believe them to be. We have watched movies, for example, which often program us into beliefs of how things should or could be. Often we watch movies about different American government organizations or different international groups and such. And we're essentially being programmed to believe that that is reality. That if we watch a movie, for instance, showcasing about how, trade negotiations or counter terrorists or organizations or, Interpol and different things like that, when we watch those things within our movies, we essentially are relating that to real life, especially when the movie is showcasing what's happening in the now around the world, using the names and the different organizations that we associate with as part of our life. How often do we see a movie, even movies such as Street Fighter, where they showcase NATO and the UN at United Nations as part of the movie, or other ones? And therefore, we're essentially amalgamating or connecting to the idea that that's part of how real world works. Or if you watch a show like House of Cards, that showcases government corruption at the highest levels, and it also depicts how the American political system works. And then we get the idea, because we trust Kevin Spacey and we followed his career for a very long time, that we start to believe that that's how things go, that that's how the engine works. And in the showcase of that particular series, it really did possibly show how our political system may work from some aspects. And yet some of us believe that that's just the way reality is. And yet, in this podcast, I truly hope to uncover and to reveal other possible ways that reality could be for those who want something different. There are so many people in this world right now, and that's what this podcast and this particular episode was meant to be about. There are so many people in the world that are challenged right now: rising gas costs, rising mortgage costs, rising interest costs, just overall fees, cancellation of airplanes. And, it seems as if there are so many challenges that we as Homo sapiens the beings that were put here perhaps by God to maybe caretake, maybe govern, maybe experience what we need to experience, go through the trials and tribulations and come out the other side forged as stronger beings, whatever it is, and however you see it, we're here. And right now, at this point in time, we are being challenged at a rate that's higher than ever. I can just walk around my own town and I see all the for sale signs, and I see the broken sidewalks, and essentially I see a lot of challenges that we are facing as a population of this planet. And yet I see also the benefits and the beautifulness of the opportunities. See, reframing reality and definitely reframing what you see as a problem into an opportunity sometimes can be a major beneficial aspect of our healing journey that we're all going through. And believe me, we're all going through it on different, perhaps, paths. And as I've mentioned before, sometimes those paths intersect. Sometimes we connect with each other for a brief moment in time and we learn something. Often I'll watch a video after maybe even reading a book, and something that reinforces what I had experienced that I truly benefited already from the book will be reflected, or perhaps maybe sometimes even somewhat copied when I'm reading that book or when I'm watching that video, I mean. And so synchronicities in our life often come up. And so one of the beneficial parts of what's happening in the world is to recognize that even a challenge, when we've come through on the other side, we've gained or we've essentially learned something. I, as a creative person, I directed and produced 2 stage plays that I personally wrote. And at the last closing night of each of those stage productions, the first one was called Permanent, and then the other one was called Shades of Grey. Anyways, I sat backstage and I wrote down all of the things that I had learned. And a lot of it was things that I had learned not to do next time, different things about relying on people, and different lessons, because on both of those stage plays I learned a lot about loyalty and betrayal, a lot of it from family, friends, from supposed family, from the actresses themselves. And well, it was the actresses in the case, even battling against many different things. Anyways, I learned a lot. And so rather than mock those up to failures, I saw them as immense successes. And so when you have an opportunity to look back at something that you've experienced, sometimes looking at to see, what did I learn from that? And what did I gain that I would not have gained if that experience had not have happened? And I see the reality that we're living on, even the reality of the scarcity of money that's happening. The supposed struggles the banks are having, and the collapse of currencies, and the rising food costs is due to the cost of, or the increase in the fuel costs, which perhaps may or may not be manipulated. But regardless, all of those circumstances are essentially detaching us from requiring the fiat currency that we have been indebted to. The banking system that we live in has worked on the principle of a debt slavery system for such a long time that we all remain on our hamster wheel, grinding and going after, the carrot that's dangling in front of us. And, you can look at that like the donkey from Shrek going after a carrot, and Shrek sitting there on the back holding a stick with that carrot, and that donkey's just keep going after that carrot, not recognizing that he's never going to get that carrot as long as Shrek is on his back. And we aren't going to receive our inheritance or our just rewards as Homo sapiens of this planet as long as we continue to contribute and to be a part of all of these systems that we are looking to get away from. One of those systems that we're looking to get away from is all the political corruption of craziness that we're going through. And yet I see videos of Albertans and Saskatchewan people supposedly wanting to get into the train of that whole American situation. You know, they talk about build back better over here in Canada and make America great again. Well, making America great again was at the loss of other people, meaning at canceling agreements with other countries. And I'm not just talking about the ones that are ludicrous, like the anything to do with green. I'm talking about, trade agreements and such, bringing down the economic effectiveness of one province and then turning around and inviting them in to become an extension of that system that you're already in. To me, that seems very strange. I would say that Alberta, for example, has a lot more reason to be by itself than to ever consider joining another organization. Same thing with Saskatchewan. From my understanding, the mineral reserves in Saskatchewan are amazing. And a lot of the food production in that area, perhaps, those factories and such, that's a resource as well. And the lumber and the timber and the natural resources of both of those provinces, in my opinion, would definitely be more suited to be individual as opposed to join a collective that is already in debt by hundreds of trillions of dollars. That's just my thoughts. But yet, those are still things that are simply my perspective, my thoughts, things that I'm thinking about. And they're not necessarily the truth because, to be all in all, I fully don't even have a clue of what's happening in this world. But yet, I choose with all of my heart, my intensity, my passion, and my energy to constantly keep my attention focused on the beautiful things that could be moving forward. See, even a game like Pokemon, and I know it feels as if I'm running over and using all these different things. Even sometimes when I'm listening or when I'm using, I mean, the AI to help me create the descriptions for my videos, this Copilot AI, it gets confused about what the purpose of my podcast is because I talk about so many different subjects, but I'm relating it back to the Pokemon. My experience with Pokemon has been multi-edged. I've had a great time playing cards, the card game with many people out there in the world, although I was just learning about all the rules and such and what a meta deck is. And yet, I've loved putting together the Legos and collecting the cards and collecting them for my son and, trading them and understanding all that stuff. And even watching an amazing show like the TV series Pokemon. If you're a parent, go and get your kids a subscription or any way that they can watch that show. There are some amazing lessons that are in that show. Pokemon is a Japanese animation show. And although it has been, or at least for the previous original series, which has to do with Ash, it showcases so much beautiful, positive messaging. It's a Japanese animation, like I said, so it hasn't been affected by a lot of what the Hollywood style of a cartoon would showcase. Anyways, being a multi-edged experience, the actual card game itself, I've seen through the manipulation and the consumerism and the overall bribery. See, they give you or they sell packages of cards that contain 10 cards in a package, which you can't see, kind of like a baseball card type of experience. And they put cards in that are random and they create like now 20% of the cards to be what they call rare or super rare. And it is almost impossible to get a card that you're looking for. And then they go and create very overpowered cards, such as the release of Mega Lucario, where they put it into the TV show, of course, but they made that card available for sale when you purchased their trainer box, meaning they put these packages together, not the elite trainer box, but like these booster boxes where you'd get a copy of that card where you're actually paying $5 to $10 extra on top of the other packages of cards that you get in that box. So you're essentially buying that card that everyone wants because it's so overpowered that when you're going to a tournament, you're going to use decks that are standardized and that are overpowered, such as the rock type or the stone type or fighting type, sometimes people call it, decks in the Pokemon. So that's kind of like a two-sided experience of something that's amazing, and the TV show definitely reflects the morals and values. But then when you go and play this, you're essentially being, asked to pay all this extra money. And yeah, so anyways, those are, see, my filters. Now, if you haven't, as a parent or even as a player, had the experience of playing Pokemon, then when you were to hear about Pokemon without, having a deeper experience, that you might therefore frame that in your own way. And so, for instance, if you're a parent who bought all the cards and fully understands the monetary monetization, I guess is the right word. If you've understood how Pokemon TCG, the card game, has been monetized into a very corrupt fashion. They create cards that are useless in playing with them in a deck. Like half of the cards that collectors collect, their cards to be used in the game are useless. I mean, they're not possible for any rhyme or reason to use them in the card game, but yet they put them in by dozens and triples and quadruples. Sometimes I can open up a package and I would get duplicates of a worthless card, or a card that would really have no value in, the world champions of Pokemon. And so if you only had that experience, you might not see the value of the cards. And so therefore that goes back to, circles all the way back to the filters that we collect as we go through our lives. We have experiences of perhaps someone, coming into our lives and hurting us, whether it was a spouse, a lover, a friend, a cousin. Sometimes boys will even have women come into their lives and get hurt, and therefore then shy off to any other relationship. And that, of course, can be flipped both ways. Beautiful women having, guys come into their lives and they get hurt by them. And, I believe all people to be beautiful in all aspects of life. And, beauty is another perception we hold about ourselves reflected in the eyes of those who see us. But nonetheless, we can have these different experiences in our lives, and therefore we can essentially shy away from the possible potentials of something to be much better. And that was showcased in a talk I recently gave about the story about the priest who's sitting on top of the church, and so many people are coming to essentially save him, but because he's mired in his belief or his perception of what he's personally believed he's experienced, he's waiting upon a savior to come save him, and he's ignoring, those beings that are coming there to help him. Even my own experience when I was almost drowned in the Lijiang River in China. And that story I'm going to mark right up here because I think that that holds a lot of amazing experiences or insights that I had from that experience. But even that, I could essentially, instead of seeing all of those people who came to try to tell me that we had to go over across now, rather than seeing them as being, deceptive or duplicitous or whatever that word is. Anyways, as opposed to seeing that as a negative thing, I could have looked at that as they were protecting me from getting to the end where I would be extorted by that pilot. And therefore, not pilot, but that boat captain. And then I wouldn't have had to go through the experience of trying to, almost drown in the water. But yet, it's still bringing that back into the positive and reframing it as something that I was learning now. I see that as a very positive benefit. So, everything that we experience in life, there's reasons or there's lessons. And as long as we stop playing whack a mole and we actually take the lesson learned and we see how we can utilize it, for instance, the whole thing with Pokemon, here's something that I benefited from. And this is a personal experience as well. There's a online version of Pokemon, and I had always warned my son away from using these little cards that they had put in every package of Pokemon, where they were essentially getting us to go online and to become part of that online community of playing Pokemon. And originally, I had discouraged him from doing that. So we threw away hundreds of those little promo codes where we could get a free digital pack. And the reason being is because I understood video games. I personally have a history, and I'll say history because it's no longer a problem with an addiction to video games. And so I recognize that video games are there for the reason to perhaps create hostility and anger and fear. And, there's a lot of positive parts to them. So, for instance, Minecraft Creative Mode is an amazing video game to create. And yet, I understood that there were challenges with getting into an online or a digital version of the Pokemon card game. Yet eventually I did. And what I started to recognize is that the game was being manipulated, that either there was an AI presence or there was someone perhaps on the other side who could literally do whatever they wanted to. I would often be playing games where I couldn't get any of the cards I needed, and frustration would grow. It would grow to the point where I would start yelling and getting angry. And, I actually hit my phone one time when I was playing on my phone. And I've had a lot of the other challenges with playing the game with curbing my own frustrations and anger. And yet, the benefit and the value that I took away from that whole experience is now when I play, I recognize the manipulation. I recognize the fraudulent activity, or even if there's someone on there playing, I recognize that when I'm playing a brand new deck and all of a sudden I have the deck, which is my weakness, come up as my opponent multiple times in the row, I recognize that there's something other going on there. And whether or not it's a AI, or like I said, it's a hacker, or, even it's a program, or even if it's programmed to be that way, part of perhaps the looshing system, whatever it is, I actually turned that lemon into a sweet experience, because now I recognize how to go into a frustrating situation, even though I recognize that, things aren't going to work out the way I'd prefer, or that the people I'm, you know, in opposition to or competing with, perhaps they are cheating. Perhaps they are holding back the truth. Perhaps they are, as I told my son the other day, lying by omission. And yet now I'm a lot stronger in order to essentially not control, but work with my anger without actually having to explode, without having to blow up. Yes, sometimes they still get me into, getting a little frustrated and stuff. And yet, I've become stronger. I've become more than what I was if I hadn't had those experiences. And just like my story of Ash having to go up against Team Rocket all the time in Pokemon in the TV series, Team Rocket's always coming up. And yet Ash, who's the main character, this amazing boy who just wants to simply be the best that he can be in regards to being a Pokemon trainer, he's constantly being thwarted or pitted against this group called Team Rocket. And yet, every episode, he's becoming a stronger boy. In the series, he's always the same age almost. So he's always becoming a better version of himself. And yes, it isn't a cumulative show, means he goes on and leaves his Pokemon, but the actual character that is essentially forged at the end of every single episode is a better version of themselves. And I have taken the benefits of Pokemon and I have added them all into the essence of who I am as a Homo sapien. And I use Homo sapien specifically for a reason, as I've come to understand, we are Homo sapiens, and yet some of us perhaps, or maybe not some of us, but there's a difference between Homo sapiens and other beings on our planet. And so when I use that word, I'm essentially pointing out that, I'm a Homo sapien, or at least I believe myself to be. And so, anyways, with all that being said, um, oh, thank you for arriving. You're never late. We are always on time. And I trust that this whole podcast, Laurel, will come up as a viewable item after. I don't know if it's going to get edited down to, well, something less than we are at right now, but I welcome you and I thank you for sharing your attention with me. So much love for everyone who shares their attention for any amount of time. And we arrive always at the perfect time, because sometimes there perhaps was something vastly more important than listening to me talk. And I'll talk an awful lot going forward, and I have a lot of things to share, and I'm truly grateful for every bit of you know, essence, attention, and love and support that I receive. And so, with that being said, I'm going to sign off now. I trust and hope that everyone who gets to this end of me speaking will definitely come over to Patreon. It's an amazing site where I'm able to showcase a lot of my photography and videos. And even sometimes I write comments, not comments, but longer posts on there. And I definitely invite you to come over and share your attention with that. You can actually join for free. Of course, if you want to build a better world with me, I definitely encourage you to consider. Um, oh, hello, Trav. I'm so excited to actually know that that's you. That's awesome. I think you might have told me before, but yeah, my memories seem to change every day, or my deep term memory or long term memory. So it's definitely important to, well, do things like what you just did and let me know exactly, so that I can therefore make that full connection that they will not erase anymore. Anyways, thank you so much for sharing your attention with me. And yeah, I definitely look forward to everyone and anyone connecting and, you know, reinforcing the idea that we didn't come to this planet to be slave workers. We came to this planet to be creators. And however you see that, through whatever religious filters or perspectives that you may hold, we came here to be more than, little mice living in shoeboxes, as one person who was commenting on, modern architecture of condos. We're not here to live in little shoeboxes. We are here to unite and co-create with this beloved planet that we walk upon, and that we have walked over for far too long. It's definitely important for us to get out there and ground and connect. And thank you so much for the rewatching part. And yeah, I am really loving being over here on Rumble, and I truly do urge Rumble to look beyond any type of controlative system or algorithm or anything like that, and definitely promote the crap out of this video, because I would love to be in a community that supports free thinking individuals and concepts and love overall. And once all of the political theater falls to the wayside, maybe there's a atmosphere and a community or built through unity. And I would love to be a part of it. So Rumble, if you're actually serious about doing what you're doing and what you're saying you're doing in your ads, then count me in, and let's create a much far better multimedia social connected and experience for everyone who's wanting to step out into new earth, a place that I believe is already here. I see parts of it, glimpses of it all the time, and yet all we maybe need to do is unite and become a little bit stronger together, and you know build back better. The better being the key word there. So thank you so much for your time and attention. And before I go, I told my turtle that I wanted to introduce her. And so this is my turtle here. I'm going to bring her. I don't know where the camera is really, but yeah, that's my big turtle. I wanted to share her. She's probably freaking all out because, she's just being held in the air like this. But anyways, this is my turtle. Sometimes we called her Big Tank, and other times we just called it Big Turtle. I tend to name things just as what they are. So this is Big Turtle. And then in the past, I had my cat, her name, and that's the beloved cat that just recently passed. Her name was Xiao Mao, which Xiao is Mandarin for small, and then Mao is for cat. So all her life, I called her Little Cat, and I had this turtle here called Big Turtle, and then I had another pet once upon a time, and I called her Mr. Duck. I didn't realize like the gender when I got this little duckling, and so I raised her, or thinking it was a him, but I just called her Mr. Duck for such a long time. And then one day she started laying eggs, and I was like, oh, well, I guess you're not a Mr. Duck. But Anyways, I love calling my animals just not by names, but by what they are. And I see that as a turtle. So it's a big turtle. And next time I will introduce you to Johnny, who's my little turtle. But Johnny had a name before we received Johnny. So I just kept that name. Anyways, thank you so much for sharing your attention. And definitely, Trev, thank you so much for commenting in the live stream. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a lot more here on Rumble. And this also has been supposedly posted on YouTube, my YouTube channel as well. So you can definitely be able to see it there as well. And yet, I would truly rather have a community and a podcast on a platform that truly wants to keep my video lengths the way that they are and stop distorting the audio on a microphone that I'm fully aware that it's working perfectly and properly. I can actually see the indicator that the distortion levels are 0 right now, and it has been that whole time. So my experience with other platforms, perhaps we will be moving somewhere. And if it's not Rumble, maybe it's Apple or Spotify. Anyways, so much love and thank you so much. And I look forward to sharing more with you. And again, so much love. Peace.